Good afternoon. My name is Daniela Elena Costea and I'm professor in tumor pathology at the University of Bergen, Norway. In this module, we will discuss the ethics of data collection and management. By the end of this session, you should get knowledge on ensuring integrity in data collection, responsible data management practices, data security principles, how to address data sharing and how to respond to a data breach, how to foster transparency and accountability during research. The learning methods are this educational video. We will have a discussion forum. You will get a case study to think and reflect on. And at the end of the module in the training manual, you have some reading material that I encourage all of you to read. Let's start with the data collection and how we should do it in an ethical way and how to ensure the integrity in this process. There are several key ethical principles. The first one is the informed consent. So participants had to consent to the research that they are participating in. This has been addressed in the previous module, but I will stress just a few aspects related to it. So, in an informed consent, all the participants should be very clearly informed about the purpose of the study, about the methodology. They should be informed that they have the right to withdraw at any time, and in case they are patients that undergo under a treatment, that their response, either they participate or not, or if they decide to participate, then to withdraw, this will not affect their treatment. This is very important. In addition, they have to be informed on how their data will be preserved, how it will be shared in case there is such a shared data plan, and also how the data will be protected. Very important. The second key principle is confidentiality. So the researchers have to protect the confidentiality and the privacy of the participants in their research project. For this, the data has to be anonymized. So it is very important that the researchers are aware of the anonymization techniques, and these techniques are used. Also, the researchers have to be very aware of the risks of storing and keeping sensitive data. So they need to know how to securely store the data. This we will discuss in the second part of this lecture. The researcher also must ensure that the data is collected accurately and that is reported honestly. So, for example, we recommend that when the data is collected, particularly if it's first collected on paper and then transferred into an electronic system, that there are two investigators together, because usually there are human errors that are happening during this transfer from the paper to the electronic system. And the principal investigator has to train his team how to do this transfer and also how to do regular checks to ensure that the data is transferred correctly. Also, an important point here that I would like to stress is the selective reporting. So let's assume you have collected your data, you have your hypothesis, and your results really don't go anyway. You cannot show any correlations, any of your hypotheses, and then you are wondering, should I report this or not? And sometimes it's difficult to report studies which don't show any correlations, or the stress is mainly on so-called positive findings. We strongly advise, and it is not ethical to report just positive correlations, so-called positive data. We need to report whatever we have found. This is part of our honesty as the researchers, but it is very important also for the whole research community and the whole society that we report all what we have found, such that the research is not repeated again and again because we don't find what maybe we have expected. Another important aspect when we collect data is the bias. We should try to avoid biases. That's why we should try to use validated instruments. So, for example, methods, instruments that have been previously reported. And also we should have objective sampling techniques. And it's very important, for example, to calculate the sample size before we start a project to be sure that whatever we collect is valid and reliable. And an important point I would like to make here is that researchers must remain objective and avoid influencing participants' response. So it is very important that the principal investigator trains the team of the investigators that will collect the data. Either it is an interview or if it's an observational study, the investigators should not show in any way, either verbally or by body language, should not give a feedback to the participants, either positive or negative. They should remain neutral, and sometimes this is difficult. That's why the principal investigator has to have sessions of preparation with all investigators to ensure that the investigators will not have instinctual reactions that can influence the response of the participant. This is very important. So we have discussed the first four key aspects about transparency. Very important. Researchers have to be transparent about the methods and the procedures. This needs to be clearly explained both to the participants but also to the stakeholders when you publish to the whole research community, because also your study should be reproducible. Someone should be able to reproduce whatever you have performed according to how you have described this into the methodology. The ethical review, it's a very important part of research. So prior to data collection, the research proposal should undergo review and approval by an ethics committee or an institutional review board, the so-called IRBs. And this review ensures that the study design adheres to ethical standards and that our potential risks, if there are, that they are minimized. So it is very important that you are aware not to start any study before finding out which ethical committee exists in your country or at your institution, and that you submit your proposal for your study to this ethical committee. Researchers also have to be very responsible and they need to know how to handle sensitive data. So when we collect, not all research projects involve handling of sensitive data, but in case we do, the researchers have to implement additional measures that data is securely collected and stored, and also they should think about potential consequences if there are data breaches. There is also high responsibility to participants. The researchers have a duty to ensure that the participants are not exposed to harm or discomfort during the data collection process. So as I mentioned, the PI, the principal investigator, has to do this very strict training of all the investigators, all the team. For example, if you have a big survey, you cannot collect the data by yourself. You need to hire or you need to have a team of investigators. You really need to do a lot of sessions of preparing them how to behave. And also, in case misconduct is happening, you need to know how to correct these issues such that the research is done in an ethical way. So, after data collection, we have the data and the researchers need to know how to manage and how to store this data. For example, at my institution, when I submit a project for review, I have to submit also a data management plan. I have to show that I know how to deal with the data that I would collect. And in order to secure a responsible data management practice, one needs to know how to plan and how to organize data collection, how to perform data collection in an ethical way, how to store the data, how to document how the data has been collected and stored. Also, that the researchers know the principles of data sharing and access to the data, and also they have to ensure data integrity and quality. Some of the key principles in the data management and data storage are overlapping with data collection, but we will go again through them, and then I hope you will remember them. So, let's see, something has happened. Yes, as I mentioned, in data planning, it is required in most of the institutions and of the country that the researcher develops a comprehensive data management plan. And this should outline how the data would be collected, processed, stored, and shared. So the data has to be organized systematically. So we need to use file naming. There are conventions for this. There are directory structures, such that in case something is happening with the principal investigator or one of the investigators, someone else could access the data that can be very valuable data, and how to understand how this data has been collected. So usually there should be an additional file in which all the codes for the data are explained. Also, all the steps are explained, all the different in an Excel. If there is an Excel file, for example, with multiple pages, every page has to be explained, and also the connection between the pages. We have been to data collection, so then if we go to data storage and security, it is very important that the data is stored in secure, backed up locations to prevent loss due to hardware failure or other issues. So at my institution, for example, we are advised to use cloud storage, and we have a special institutional server. It's called Safe, where we could upload and we could store sensitive data. It is also very important that the access to this data is controlled. So, for example, in my project, it's only me who has access to, for example, the codes that connect the different personal identifiable data with the coded non-identifiable data and anonymized data that I could share with other investigators. Usually it's the clinician or the principal investigator that holds the key, and the key has to be secured at my institution through 2 ways of authentication. It is very important also to encrypt the data. So there are we get help from IT if we are not able to do the encryption of ourselves, but it is highly recommended to use encryption when it is necessary to protect data privacy. And in my experience, almost always you need this encryption. As I mentioned, it is very important to document very well how the data was collected, how it is stored, how different codes are. For example, if one uses SPSS or Excel and uses different codes, this needs to be explained very clearly, as well if any transformations have been applied. So this is very important, and it has to be comprehensible to ensure that other researchers have the access in case something is happening with the principal investigator, and they will understand how the data has been collected. This is also important when you share the data, that you have very good metadata. And also it is very important, again, in data sharing, first of all, that the participants have been informed that their data will be shared, so that it will be shared, for example, in my ethical approval, I have to send in also the informed consent that my participants will sign, the participants in my study, and there it's very clearly stated that the data, but non-identifiable data, and in my case biological material, will be shared with, and I have to be very clear and say France, for example, Université Côte d'Azur, or any other institution. In case I want to share later on some of the data or the material, I have to actually send letters back to the participants and ask them for the consent to share the data with a due institution if this institution hasn't been mentioned in the first place in the informed consent they have signed. Yes, for data sharing, it is very important, as I said, I repeat, to ensure that shared data is anonymized or de-identified to protect participants' privacy. Sometimes there is explicit consent, or it can be obtained, that someone can share identifiable data. This is happening in very, very seldom occasions. Yes, and then we have come to the last point, which is data integrity and quality control, because either you as principal investigator or the institution has to ensure quality control measures throughout the whole data life cycle, and this will include regular data audits, validation checks, and peer reviews. So, for example, at my institution, I have yearly, they pick one research group that the institution leadership goes through their ethical approval, informed consent, what data they have, where are they stored, and so on. We go now to some principles of data security. As I mentioned now, some of these aspects have been mentioned already during this lecture, but I want to be sure that you get them with you. So, in order to secure data, we have to secure confidentiality of sensitive data of participants. For this, we should use encryption, anonymization techniques, and secure systems. So we need to control the access to the codes that couple the personal information with the other data. Very important is to have integrity, and we could help to maintain the integrity by regular audits and integrity checks. We need to be compliant to the regulations, ethical regulations and legal standards. So in Europe, for example, we follow the General Data Protection Regulation, and we need to be aware of any changes happening in this set of rules. I have checked, and I am not aware, from what I could find, that there is such a comprehensive data protection law in Sudan, but there are some in East Africa, there are some in East and South Africa, in South Africa and Kenya, and I am assuming that soon there will be also for Sudan some general rules. Very important for data security is to have a policy for mitigating harm and know how to do this, to be transparent, and to hold accountability for how we perform research and how we store and collect the data. And it is very important also that we secure the data for long term, because some project might generate data that could be used over time, and that's why ensuring the data security over time is very important to maintain the trust of the research participants and the scientific community. So the archival of this data usually is the institution who should provide a safe server, as I mentioned, the server safe that we have. I don't know in your case, usually we don't recommend storing this data on private computers that can be stolen and breached in. And now we come to a maybe more practical part of the lecture, which is how to address the data sharing and the breach response. I guess most of you will come over issues in data sharing, and I hope none of you would experience breach in the data security. I didn't experience so far, and I hope I will not, but in case it will happen, we need to be prepared. So for data sharing, again, it is important to start with informed consent. Inform your participants that you plan to share your data. You need to respect the confidentiality of your participants when you share the data. So you use anonymization techniques and use encryption, and also you, if possible, have only one investigator, if not you, with access to that holds the key for the code that links the data with the personal information. And don't share that with your collaborators. Share only anonymized data. You need to use the principle of fair use and equity, meaning that you should provide the data, you should provide exactly the same data, you should give equal access to all potential users. That's why, for example, many of the journals today, they want the data to be shared on public repositories, anonymized, such that everyone from the research community has access and can analyze this data, maybe coming up with new hypotheses, new correlations, explanations for new behavior or trends in our society. Very important, we need to maintain data integrity and quality. We need to provide detailed metadata. If we decide to share the data, then we have to provide all the metadata. Again, not the personal sensitive information. Then we come to the data breach response. We need to be prepared in case this would happen. It is very important to follow these key steps. If we get to know that it has been a data breach in our data set, we need to notify immediately both the participants and the authorities, as well as all the stakeholders, but first of all, the participants and the authorities. We need to mitigate the harm. We need to know, first of all, how to prevent further unauthorized access, and also to address any immediate risk to participants. If we have some very sensitive information, for example, you will see in the case study that I hope you'll go through and you will write to me your reflections. If it is a refugee camp with very sensitive information, participants that get exposed need to be put under special protection. One has to be very transparent for whatever had happened, what has been the breach affecting, and also we need to take responsibility for what has happened. So we need to go through what has happened and really rethink the whole process of data collection and particularly data storage if it has been a data breach, and to train the investigators for this not to happen again. In order to do that, we need to work sometimes with cyber experts, and it depends. At our institution, the institution would support the costs affiliated with this, because the cyber experts actually can track if it has been an online data breach, if it has been a hacking of the computer. Sometimes this can be found out and data can be retrieved, or at least should be blocked from more leakage. If a data breach has happened, this is a moment also for ethical reflection and improvement. As I said, the principal investigator has to go again through all the procedures with the team of the investigators and reinforce the security, but also come up with new methods for security, maybe not store again onto a local computer. Most likely this measure should have been already implemented and stored securely on a server where a dedicated IT team is ensuring the integrity of the data and the security. The last aspect that I wanted to discuss is how the researcher should foster transparency and accountability. I think we have been through this already several times. Again, for transparency, we should have open methodologies, both for the participants, but also for the whole research community and society. Very important is that the researcher should disclose any conflicts of interest. In my field, for example, if a researcher is also part of a private company or has any interest in testing a drug and wants to have a study particular on that drug, most likely will not be allowed, or it should be very, very open and state there. But any kind of disclosure, like participating in some associations, or even being the clinician, for example, that treats some of the participants in the study. And data availability, as I mentioned, the data have to be available, but very important not to disclose any personal sensitive information. The researchers also should be aware that when they perform research project and they collect data, they are also accountable for the way they conduct the research, that they should have an ethical oversight and integrity, and also that they are obliged to report any misconduct. Either it's their own and they were not aware, or if it's the misconduct of someone in the team, this has to be professionally addressed. It shouldn't be hidden. It shouldn't be used as a punishment or as a revenge, but it has to be handled properly. This is the case study exercise, which is a very short version of the case study that is published on the net. So please go there on module 5, read the case study there, and please reply to me, let message online, and I'll respond to you. In summary, as researchers, we need to uphold ethical principles to ensure trustworthiness and credibility. We need to be transparent, we need to feel accountable, and we need to secure that the data is stored in the right way so it doesn't leak. And we have to do this in order to perform responsible research, because the participants, they trust us with their personal information, with their data, and we need to show them respect and we need to protect their data. Thank you for your attention. This is a picture with the winter in Norway. So see you tomorrow.